Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. It is episode 701, coming to you on the 23rd of October, the year of our Lord, 2024. And today, I guess I want to say I've got a few addendums to the episode 700. I thought about it after I had recorded it and thought there might have been a few items in there that could be misinterpreted. So I'll clarify those a bit. But today the primary function is the death of service. So when I say the death of service, I mean across the board. There's just no better other explanation I come up with than people just don't want to work. There's a number of different reasons why that might be, and we'll explore some of that. But before we get there, before we get to the program, if you will, for today, let me remind you that even though we're going to be doing a revamp, even though there's going to be a sabbatical, even though there's going to be some changes, I still would covet the time that it would take for you to like, share, and subscribe to this program. The feed's not going to change. The feed will be the same. We might change a few other things up, but it's going to come out. We're going to keep working at this. And when I say we, I mean me. It's just got to figure out a better and more efficient way to do this. And that's what we're going to work on for the month of November, essentially. What does that mean? That means I could still really use a rate or review for the program. Following me on the social media of your choice is extremely helpful. That means you can come see me on Facebook, where I have a page and a group. I'm a pro at Gab. I still drop in at MeWe, and believe it or not, you can still find my show, at least the audio, if you will, over on YouTube. We're going to have to explore other options. We're going to have to find a way to break through. The algorithm's been chewing up my efforts, and quite frankly, it's not a lot of fun. It's disappointing. It's kind of a beatdown, but it is what it is. We move on, and we keep trying. We keep fighting. That's all we can do. All right. That's it. Let's move on. So I was thinking about some of the things that I had said on episode 700, and I know some people could choose to interpret it different ways. I'm just going to say that I've always found that being gracious and giving people the benefit of the doubt and not assuming the worst of people is the best way to interact. Does that mean that sometimes you get burned? Yeah. Does it mean sometimes you get fooled? Yeah. But I find that grace allows me to function as a human. And remember, it helps me remember that the other people I'm dealing with are also humans. We make mistakes. We let each other down. It's just normal. So when I articulated the idea that it's, an IQ test of heritage Americans, or if you will, historical Americans, I stand by that. You can't expect people that have been here for maybe one generation, or first generation, meaning their parents came here and they were born here, to understand all that's at play. And I understand there are legitimate concerns and legitimate problems. In fact, I'm a pretty good critic of many of the current problems that we have in these United States. Unfortunately, you also have to come to grips with the idea that we're really the best place to be. People are still coming here at great cost to themselves. Not flooding the border people, but just people in general, because we are the last best opportunity. We are the last best bastion of what some would call freedom. I would say, as huge as our government is, as intrusive as our government is, it's not as bad as some of the other places, or most of the other places. Now, it's true when you have no government, you have no security, you have no freedom because you live in fear all day. If you have massive amounts of government, which most of Europe does, in the United States has, then you have limited freedom. I found this profoundly interesting to me when I was driving down the street today and I saw a sign put out, I guess, by the Colin Democrat Party. And they had 3 issues that they were touting that the Democrat Party was good on or better than the Republican Party. The first 2 were family and freedom. I mean, I promptly forgot what the third one was because I couldn't get over the internal laughing that was going on when we talked about family and freedom. We're talking about a party that refuses to define what a woman is. We're talking about a party that objectively does not respect life. We're talking about a party that thinks that if you mutilate yourself, you can pretend to be something that you're not. We're talking about a party that routinely dismisses any concerns from anybody because of, their chromosomes. Now, you could say the same to some degree about the other party, but that's a stretch, a big stretch. And then when you move on to freedom, what freedoms? I mean, really, truly, what freedoms are they defending? The only freedom that they seem to be interested in is the ability for a mother to kill her child in the womb. The freedom for a woman to leave her marriage, I mean, that assumes we can agree what a definition of a woman is. We'll just say the spouse that is feminine to leave a marriage and basically live off of her former spouse. I mean, that's what they're advocating for. The family and the freedom, right? I fail to see anything else significant that they're championing. I mean, these are the same people that cheered when they shut down the world in 2020. These are the same people that felt threatened because you wouldn't take a medical procedure forced upon you. These are the same people that felt like if you didn't follow some rule, you should be an other and you should be locked down. You should be tormented. That's the same people. Now, unfortunately, there's a whole lot of people that have R after their name that fall into this camp, but they're progressives too. Just progressives of a different stripe. And then when you factor in the entirety of the party has now flipped, where at least before, when I was a child, you could nominally say there were some peaceniks in the Democrat Party. There were some hippies in the Democrat Party. There were people that didn't want wars all over the place. Those are people that respected a country's right to not do what the United States wanted. Because when the United States wants something, they'll bribe you first, and if you don't do it, then they'll threaten you. And if the threats don't work, they will probably bomb and or invade you. We have a long track record of that. And as much as I love my country, I have a deep fear of my government and the abuses that it encourages. And when I say deep fear, it's the same way that I fear God. It's a respect. I don't like the government and the way they abuse their power, but I still respect it. I'm well aware of what they bring to bear. You don't pick a fight with somebody that's going to dispatch you in 30 seconds or less. That's just not a good option. So, in light of all of that, I think I've clarified where I was coming from on episode 700 there. So as we saunter off over to the death of service. So once upon a time, the progressives sold us on the idea that people in leadership were there to serve. They were there as a service. They were giving back. And we still hear that from time to time from certain groups or certain quarters of our society. But I don't believe that's necessarily true. I mean, there are a few iconoclasts out there that are driven purely by duty and honor, and they will take the abuse because they think they're doing the right thing. Now, I like to think of myself as one of those people. I like to push myself to do those things, but I also pick my battles. I also decide, sometimes it's not worthy the fight here. Sometimes it's not worth sticking my nose in other people's business, right? Even if it's the right thing. So I would say, I'm going to give a few examples. Now, I have a long history in the automotive service business. I would say about 20 years or so. I worked in automotive service, and I worked at a number of dealerships that are still around, and some are more successful than others. And one of the things that we are always strived on is taking care of our customers. Now, nobody's perfect. Nobody gets it 100% all the time. That's not what I'm saying. There was an effort there. There was a desire to make the customer aware that we cared and that we wanted them taken care of and that we appreciated their business and that we weren't there to treat them poorly. I mean, you can read into that as much as you want, but just treating the customer poorly has a number of different facets, but I'm going to specifically stay non-specific. Now, back in the day, when I was doing this for a living, you always had the people that did things a little differently than you did. Or you had people that would maybe ride that line a little bit of what was taking care of the customer and what wasn't. And some customers were okay with that. Some customers had thicker skin. Some customers just had different personality. Some didn't care one way or the other. They just wanted their car fixed and to get it back. And as long as somebody called them and told them it was done and gave them the price that they quoted them earlier, they just didn't care. Somewhere along the line, in the, nearly decade that I've been out of the car business, it's, I guess, no longer thought to be important to take care of your customer. It's not thought that it's important to communicate with your customer, to update your customer, to do what you say you're going to do. And I know this is not unique to automotive service. It's just the business that I have the most direct experience with. You see this in restaurants as well. I mean, why in the world, if I'm buying something at a counter, would I want to sign off on a tip for the person at the counter when I don't even have my food yet? Am I tipping them because they let me tell them what I wanted? Am I tipping them because they took my money? I'm not really sure. And here's the thing. People deserve to be paid for what they do. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is the tip is a gratuity, which you give in, gracious recognition of the work that they've done for you. And it's a challenge to me to go ahead and tip somebody because they took your order. But the core, or the opposite is, if you will, if you don't, they might mess up your order. They might be rude. So what's a guy to do? Well, how are you supposed to handle this? And we're still paying the consequences of, for the better part of 2 years, our government saw fit to pay people to stay at home. They paid people to not work. So now that people have to go back to work, the concept that you're going to have to get your hands dirty, that you're going to have to do something, that you're going to have to earn your keep, seems like a foreign concept to them. I mean, imagine you're 17, 18 years old in 2020, and for the first 2 years of what should have been your job career, you got paid to sit at home and play video games and eat whatever. So then when you go out to the real world, when you go out and you get a job, you just don't know how to interact. And frankly, the people that work through all of this, myself included, we got a little jaded, right? We're out busting our butts, doing our work, and we got paid the same. And then we would get reports of people that didn't even have a job before the lockdowns, getting paid, a third to half of what we were making to do nothing but sit at home. Some made more than that. They sold us on the idea that the economy was going to crash, the world would be over if, they didn't do what they did, but in reality, all they did is delay the inevitable. We're living in that right now. When you create trillions of dollars by keystrokes, prices go up necessarily. When you pay people to not work, they lose their work ethic. And when you put them back into the work stream, right? You put them back into the job center, they don't have any interest. They're not hungry anymore. Now, there's something to be said for the idea that millennials or Gen Z or Gen Alpha, even at this point, they see what we have done as Gen X. They see what the boomers have done, and they say to themselves, I want no part of this. I don't want to go work 60 hours a week to make a little extra money, to have no life, to have my life blow up, to lose my wife, lose my children, and be miserable all the time while I'm chasing some money. So I actually don't fault them for that. I can appreciate that. But if you're going to go to the trouble to get a job, and there's certain expectations put upon you to do the job, it would seem to me that you ought to decide, do I really want this job? You know, this notion of quiet quitting is also just called laziness, right? They have an expectation that they should make $20 an hour for doing nothing. I never knew a manager that made big money that didn't look like he was frazzled all the time. In fact, when I was, filling in on management roles, I would feel a massive burden from time to time of, oh my gosh, how do they do this all the time? And I would just do it, on weekends or on a vacation where the boss man's out. So I got a little taste of it, and I appreciated later on when they got back what they had to deal with. Everybody seems to think that the boss doesn't do anything, but the boss is the guy that's ultimately responsible for everything that goes on. So now I'm not justifying the CEOs that make 1,000 times more money than what the lowest paid employee is. No, but most corporations are not giant organizations. There are a couple hundred people or less, and the boss man, the man that's on call 24/7 essentially, yeah, there needs to be a significant salary or bonus structure there. Absolutely. I don't fault that. I'm not bitter about that. But likewise, when you're dealing with people that work largely off of a commission, you would think they would have a vested interest in doing a little extra to go in and getting things done quickly. I mean, that's why the boss man is always pushing, because he gets a bonus. So when you have people that are motivated by their salary, that's great. But I think those days are gone now. People only are motivated by the bonus or their commission. And if they're doing a great job in order to earn that commission or the bonus, great. But what happens when they don't care about that, when that ceases to be a motivation, right? So you got to ask yourself, what exactly are people motivated by if it's not for taking care of their family, making money, getting ahead? So here's the final piece of the puzzle here, if you will, or the secondary portion, if you will. Service was often seen as a means to its end, or the end to its means. A means unto itself. That's what I wanted to say. Service was seen as something unto itself. The point was, I'm doing this because it's the right thing. I'm doing this because this is something that interests me. I'm doing this to make a difference. So we saw, or you heard... You heard me explain just, two areas that I'm quite familiar with where service has fallen down. There's just a lack of interest, lack of effort. And it's not everywhere, but it's common. And it's not terrible, but it's not good. So when I look at the world in my my favorite thing to, delve into is political in nature usually, right? So I spent some time on episode 700 talking about the notion that we have term limits. The term limits are there for a reason, and I support the term limits as they are. I also said that if they should expand it to 12 years, which would be 3 4-year terms, as opposed to 2 2-year terms, where I say 8 is enough, if they do it, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. And I think part of the problem is a lot of people are fixated on the personalities their personal choice or their preferences and not the principle, right? So if we're going to say by principle, we're going to have term limits on the people that most directly affect our daily lives, i.e. the city council in the city that you live in, and just say 8 years is enough, they should be training up people to replace them. They should be, thinking ahead, utilizing the vision that they sold us on when they got elected in the first place. That brings me to the second point, right? So there's 4 propositions in McKinney. Proposition B is basically giving a pay raise. Now, I suspect the city council or any council could have maybe elected to give themselves a raise if they really wanted to in other ways. But they did it completely above board. They said, look, you, the citizens of our community, we're not finding that $50 for meetings is adequate to make it worth our while. Now, you can say whatever you want about that, but I'm going to tell you, Paul basically said the workman is worth his wage, right? Common sense tells us that you get what you pay for. And observation has shown us nobody works for free. Now, I'm not suggesting that given the city council, and I don't remember the exact numbers, I don't even really care, but let's just say for argument's sake, it's $1,000 a month. Giving city council members $1,000 a month, which would be $12,000 times 7, because there's 7 city council members, and yeah, I know the mayor's going to get a little more, whatever, I don't care. We're talking about a budgetary expense of less than $100,000. They routinely spend much, much more to that on other things. Now, you can say what they do isn't worth it. You can say that the individuals there don't deserve it. You can say whatever you want, but I'm here to tell you, I firmly believe in the notion that you get what you pay for, because people don't work for free. Or at least they don't for long. And I would make the same argument, even though I think that our school district, led by the current school board, is a mess in some respects, in the form of the leadership, not the people actually doing the job in the schools per se. But I think that they ought to be getting paid. If you're an elected official representing people and you're essentially supposed to answer their questions and be available to be questioned, 7 days a week, most of the day, you ought to get paid for your troubles. So when the city council does the right thing and they say, look, we would like to get paid. We think this is a fair pay for what we do. Please approve it. I think that's appropriate. Now, while I might oppose Proposition A, I support Proposition B. You have to be willing to separate the personalities. You have to be willing to say, well, look, I'm not crazy about spending another $100,000 in our budget, but when we're spending millions upon millions of dollars, what's $100,000? It's nothing. It's chump change. Now, we make that argument for every little interval that they do. Yes, true. But let me ask you. You've heard me say this, and it's not unique to me, and it predates me probably before I was born. But it's also been said, hey, we ought to just get all these elected officials, they just go ahead and wear jackets or jumpsuits like they do in NASCAR with all their sponsors on it, so we'll know exactly who's paying for them. Well, I would suggest to you that if you have a city council that's actually getting paid a little bit, they're going to be less likely or less motivated, if you will, to be taking a little something on the side or be tempted to take a little something on the side when they're actually getting paid for their time. Because when people work for free or for peanuts, they get bitter about it. They want to reward themselves. They tend to feel like they're being taken advantage of. Now, is that fair? No, maybe not. But is it understood? Sure. I mean, think about it. Every movie, every TV show, every dirty cop in the TV show gives some variation on, I bust these criminals every day, and I see they've got all this money, all these cars, these beautiful homes, the jewelry, the girls, whatever. I decided I needed a little something. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I got to pay for this stuff. So I took it. I got that little something. I had to do it. I mean, that's the excuse given all the time. Now, granted, it is TV, it is fiction, but it didn't just come out of thin air. It didn't just, come to some writer's mind. No, there's got to be a common basis for this. So let me ask you. I don't know, and I don't think you know either, exactly how much time each city council member, or for that matter, school board member, spends per week on their, let's call it, vocational job here, leading the city or leading the school district. But let me ask you, if they're spending 10 hours a week, is that a fair statement? Do we think that might be accurate? Between visitations, classes, interactions, phone calls? Can we establish that's a baseline minimum that the city council at least puts in 10 hours a week? So let's say they get, 40 hours a month then, right? Well, if it's 4.2 weeks, let's just say that's 45 hours, right? And for math, we're going to make it 50 just because. Easy math. And we're going to say they're getting paid $1,000. That's not what they're asking for. And I'm going to also grant you that they're probably not going to put in 50 hours. But in fairness, the mayor from time to time or some of the other senior city council members may very well put in more hours. Not all the time, but on average, I'm going to say they work at least 10 hours a week. And if you figure that as a 50 hours in a month, right? 50 hours in a month and you're getting paid $1,000. Now, granted, they're not asking for $1,000. I believe the number is actually $750. But just simple math, stupid math here, right? 50 hours into 1,000 is $20. $20 an hour. Now let me ask you. You've got a lot of businessmen, people and ladies with degrees that are highly skilled, highly educated. How many of them do you think work at their job for $20 an hour or less? How many of them would get up and go to, work at some fast food joint where they're making $18 an hour? I mean, heck, you can go get a job, an entry-level job at Lowe's for about $19 an hour. That's not very much, and it doesn't go very far in today's day and age. I mean, I would have loved to have made $19 an hour in 1994. But that's not where it was. That's not where it is. We're dealing with the here and now. And I think it's a reasonable request to say, hey, I'm a city council member. I'm putting in 50 hours a month at least. Or, well, let's say 40 to 50 hours a month. I'm looking to get $750 or $1,000 a month. Pay me for my time because I'm investing this time that I could be with my family, that I could be making money somewhere else, that I could be doing something else. I mean, I've made this same argument for the people that go down to the Texas House, right? I mean, we should be paying them $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to be a state rep. I know there's an expense there, and quite frankly, I don't care. I think it's very appropriate. And I think if you're a state rep, you ought to be working at least 250 days out of the year for your constituents. You ought to be available year-round for your constituents, and you ought to be paid for your time. I don't think that's a big stretch. I don't think it's a big ask. Now, I'm perfectly content with them to go down there and work, 4 months out of the year, every other year, and spend a bunch of time campaigning, but they need to be available to meet with their constituents. They need to be working. And if they're not getting paid, they're taken away from their ability to take care of their family. They're taken away from their ability to save money or pay their bills. We should just pay people for what they do. Because ultimately we're going to get what we pay for. Because while it might be service, while it might be some form of volunteerism, right? I have no doubt in my mind there are several people that have served on city council or the school district on the school board that could have been making real money doing something else with a real career or a real job, but they chose to invest, or they said, you know what, I did well in life, so I'm going to scale it back and spend my time doing this. Nobody's going to get rich with $10,000, $12,000 a year. Nobody going down to work for the Texas House getting paid $70,000 a year is going to be, living in what is, I think it's tall cotton, right? That's not it. It's just a basic paycheck to ensure they got good people that are going to do the job, that are committed to doing what we ask them to do because they're there to represent us. Not the people that pad their re-election campaign, not the people that, take care of them in other ways. Oh, come on. Let's be real. We know this stuff happens. It's all done nice and legal-like, I'm sure, but they don't work for us if we ain't paying them. That's what you need to remember. You get what you pay for because nobody works for free. So when I ask you, when you're looking at these propositions in the city of McKinney, or anywhere in the state of Texas, when you're thinking about your Texas House reps or your Texas state senators, you're going to get what you pay for. So wouldn't it be better to pay them something to where they can take care of their business and do the job that we asked them to do, which is represent us, and to do what we need them to do to take care of us? And for God's sake, could they at least put Texas first? Well, they might if Texas is paying them. Okay, maybe it was a fantasy, but rant is over. With that, this has been According to Callus. This was the bonus episode. I'm going to have another one, 702, coming out, I think, on Friday. We're going to be dealing with the death, murder, suicide, or whatever we want to call it, of Chrysler. It's something near and dear to my heart. So with that, I will see you on the other side.